In the first episode of this 4-part series, we talked about why workplace conflict is increasing and why high conflict behavior can have such an outsized impact on teams, leaders, and HR. In episode 2, we looked at how to assess workplace conflict more accurately, what to look for, how to spot patterns, and how to catch warning signs earlier. But once you've identified the problem, the next question is the one every leader eventually faces. What do you actually do when conflict is already in the room? Because this is where leaders often make things worse without meaning to, by over-explaining, reacting emotionally, avoiding limits, or confronting in ways that actually escalate the situation. So today, we are getting practical. Welcome to It's All Your Fault on True Story FM, the one and only podcast dedicated to helping you with the most difficult and challenging human interactions, those involving high conflict situations. I'm Megan Hunter, and I'm here with my co-host, Bill Eddy.
Hi, everybody.
We are the co-founders of the High Conflict Institute and conflictinfluencer.com. And today we're just thrilled once again in this 3-part series to be joined by Michael Lomax. Hi, Michael.
Morning.
Tell us a little bit about where you live, because I think most of our listeners know that Bill's in California and I'm in Arizona. Where are you?
I'm on, Vancouver Island in Canada on the West Coast.
West Coast. Yeah, sounds beautiful. I will get there one day. So Michael is one of our esteemed speakers and at High Conflict Institute and has been a lawyer and mediator for many, many years. And so we really appreciate you being on the episode with us again today, Michael.
That's great.
And welcome, listener. Good. Welcome, listeners. And thank you for joining us today on your archaeological dig. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you. Once a leader, or let's say someone in the HR department, an HR professional, has identified a high conflict pattern, let's say there's a lot of complaining that, something bad has happened. I'm the victim once again. It's someone else's fault, or whatever the pattern might be. What usually goes wrong next? Why do smart leaders get pulled into these conflicts?
I'd probably say a couple of things just to start off with. For people listening, they might worry that, do I have to kind of diagnose this person as a high conflict person and sort of fit them into a bunch of criteria? No, we don't need to do that. In fact, we would discourage you from trying to diagnose this person. Instead, it really is looking at these behavioral patterns. We can all get upset. And we can all sometimes act out at work, but then realize, okay, I shouldn't have done that. And sometimes situations can overwhelm average people. And sometimes for a long period of time, big organizational restructuring, I'm worried about losing my job, or other big changes at work, or life events outside work. All of those things can cause us to show up differently or in problematic ways. I think a lot of the skills and approaches that we talk about can be helpful there too. But this 5%, this is a small percentage of people, but in a big organization that can absolutely have a huge impact. So I think, we're looking for those behavioral patterns that show up over time, not a single event. And so then the challenge for leaders is we get caught in sort of reacting or surprise, and then we don't know how to respond. We feel overwhelmed ourselves by some of this. And sometimes we have maybe unrealistic expectations that if I can just get through to this person, or they've said they won't do it again, so that's good. We're on a better track now. This is not going to be happening again. And then it happens again, and we're shocked, we're disappointed, and maybe we even blame ourselves. So we somehow start to think, I got to fix this person, which actually takes us way down the wrong path. And actually we end up in more conflict with this person. We might end up avoiding them or avoiding dealing with it because we don't feel confident. We don't know how. And then later we overreact. And so really it is, how do I maintain this assertive middle where I'm maintaining a positive problem solving relationship with this person? And they see me as someone, I want to see you succeed. I want to see you do well in this organization. And then I have structure, but there are rules or there are consequences for certain behavior. But this is to help you. This is to help you learn how to behave in this organization, how to succeed. And that really becomes the platform for our work together. And otherwise, if we're not able to address it, it can impact the whole team. It can cause people to leave, people to go on sick leave, that kind of thing. And so we really need to find ways to kind of assertively address these things proactively, positively.
Now, let me add some thoughts here. I think you touched on something important, which is about, hold on a second. Megan, you appeared and we disappeared. Did something drop or are we still okay?
You're still showing up on my end.
Yeah, I heard you perfectly, Bill. So I saw that happen, but nothing else.
So
Can you see each other now?
Yeah, everything looks fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but for a moment I thought it was just you and that anyway, okay.
Okay.
So I'll start up again. Yeah, so I want to just add a couple things, enhance what Michael said about overreacting and also underreacting. And I think looking at this as a problem to solve, looking at this as behavior, look at new behavior that needs to be done. One of the biggest concerns I have is that we avoid jumping to conclusions about the problem. And like Michael said, we shouldn't be diagnosing people, but there are some patterns of behavior, particularly that high conflict people have. They're preoccupied with blame and they don't take responsibility really for their part. A lot of all or nothing thinking and maybe some extreme behaviors. And it's important not to assume it's equally two people in conflict. It's just a personality conflict, go away and get along. And we shouldn't assume it's just one person. So we have to be careful about these assumptions and careful we don't overreact, underreact, that people really focus on, what's the problem and what's the new behavior that we need here so that it's not about insight. And once you realize maybe I'm dealing with a high conflict person, you're not going to talk them into self-awareness. That's one of the problems they have. So instead, you want to talk about, let's look at your choices here. Let's look at your options. Let's look at what we need to do and the benefit to you. I love what you said, Michael, about we want you to succeed here and to get that kind of message. But focus on behavior, especially new behavior. Don't focus so much on the old behavior and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't have done that. We need you to do more of this so that it's future focused, so that doesn't trigger defensiveness unnecessarily. So it's kind of figuring out the problem, but don't make assumptions. That's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, so important because I think we can get it backwards sometimes.
Yes.
And we may have our own biological reactions where we may not like this person so much because of the behavior. And that can lead us into making quick assumptions. And those assumptions may lead us to thinking in our own all or nothing ways, like this person just needs to go, right? Instead of, can we help this person be successful here? And sometimes we can. So we're going to talk about a few of those things today. So let's start, Bill, with BIFF. Our listeners are very familiar with BIFF. If you're new here as a listener, Bill's going to tell you all about BIFF. BIFF has become sort of a philosophy, a way of being, sort of, and how we interact with other people. So we're going to first help us understand what BIFF is, what it's used for, and how it can help with someone who has these high conflict behaviors in the workplace.
Yeah. So BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And it's designed for responding to hostile emails, hostile texts, or even letters that are written. It's become a frame of reference that people are using also for verbal interactions. And the feedback we get is when people start writing this way, it changes their attitude towards the other person. They start taking a problem-solving approach instead of, I hate this person or this person, is all such a big problem. and instead becoming more strategic. What do I need? In one paragraph, what can I say that says how we can solve a problem and keep moving forward? And so one of the important things about BIFF is it doesn't focus on what people have wrong. It focuses on what to do and information you may not be aware. Here's some information you may not have. So I'll give a quick example. Let's say someone gets an email or text saying, you were so rude and inconsiderate yesterday. You were making noise when I was making phone calls. And, you always do this kind of thing. And you're just, it's so inconsiderate and rude, etc. So you get that. And so here's what I would call a BIFF response, as long as this is true. If this is true, so a person writes back, thanks for letting me know your concerns. And you can say that even when someone's saying all this stuff, they're kind of letting you know there's a problem buried in there somewhere. Thanks for letting me know your concerns. You may not be aware, but yesterday I was out of town. So what you're talking about would not have applied to me. I hope things can work out peacefully for the future, and I wish you well. And that's BIFF response. That's all you need to do. You don't need to say, hey, buddy, you got it wrong. You're the jerk. You're the rude person. Look at the way you just wrote to me. None of that is necessary. You just, thanks for letting me know your concerns, for your information. I wasn't there yesterday, and I hope you can get this worked out. Good luck, or whatever. So it just shifts the conversation. And what's so important to know is attacking the other person back just keeps it going. It's a spiral effect. It's, and you see this all the time on the internet, comments that lead to worse and worse. It's always a spiral down once that kind of hostility gets expressed. And so this just bounces it back in a positive framework. And you can influence the conversation. And often a good BIFF response doesn't get anything further. It's like, all right, I get it. And it goes away. That's the firm part. Firm doesn't mean harsh. But I think, Megan, you were kind of getting at that this actually influences the bigger picture, how people think about each other. And in organizations, you think about what's the problem? What's the information that's missing? How can I communicate this in a friendly way and firm way? And it's so much more, forward facing and problem solving rather than the attack and defend cycle. So I think that's the benefit of BIFF. And I estimate, because, we developed this method in 2007, that we've probably taught about 500,000 professionals and individuals through our books and seminars and articles and website. And just about everyone that learns this method teaches somebody else. So I estimate about 1 billion people are using this in the workplace, in legal disputes, et cetera.
So, Michael, I was thinking with BIFF, in written communications in the workplace, there's so, if you receive one of these kind of hostile emails or Slack message or whatever medium it is, you can really take a hit, right? And you get that gut punch. Now you're kind of emotionally hooked. Being emotionally hooked can ruin your day or maybe even ruin even in just an hour. That's an hour of productivity loss. And many people that we work with and help talk about going home, taking these emails home, taking that message from the email or the message home and losing sleep over it. And they just keep ruminating about it and it goes around in their mind over and over. They think about how to respond. And that's those who are able to stop themselves before firing off that kind of just knee-jerk reaction response. And I've seen those where, the very reasonable person in the workplace is, kind of being, sparred with via email. And they finally get that one email that makes them just lose their mind. And then they write something back, hit send, boom. And then there's the regret. right? It feels good in the moment and it's happened so quickly. And you're usually such a reasonable person. It's like, how did I do this? And now I'm embarrassed. Now I regret it. Now I'm going to look high conflict to everybody else on the team. Right. So that's one, sometimes there's those that just come out in the moment. Then there's others that we do take home and ruminate over it. Regardless, there's negative outcome, right? It takes time. It causes stress. So what do you see in the workplace? Do you see other ways this is applied? Other problems it causes?
Oh, okay. And I would say, in terms of our own reaction to this, right, and the problems that causes, well, yeah, as a leader, what I may start doing is I'm not checking in with myself to say, what's going on for me? Am I in a kind of defensive frame of mind here? The moment that kind of takes over, and the research says that can happen in less than a second. And the other problem is we don't realize that it happened. We still think we're in this kind of logical problem-solving frame of mind, but we don't realize if we're talking, our voice has changed, our face has changed. And if we're writing, it's interfering. We have distorted thinking. This sounds really good. I'm making some really good points. And in fact, this is the worst thing I could be sending right now. So I think a couple of things are checking in with ourselves, just going to the balcony, almost visualizing myself, looking down on the situation and observing myself, observing my reaction, because then I'm getting cognitive on my feelings, on my reaction. And that alone sometimes can help me shift back. Or I need to take a break, or I need to, before I reply, I'm actually going to show this to, it could be somebody in HR, it could be a trusted confidant, say, am I sounding defensive? Even if I'm trying a BIFF response, I can still go beyond information into defending myself without realizing. Get someone else to coach me on it. Yes, you're sounding a bit defensive here. Okay, so that just taking that time to check in with myself. And then really the other thing is, how can I regulate? And things like, Bill, you talk about encouraging statements, telling myself encouraging statements. Our brain is always listening to us. And usually we imagine, especially as you're talking about, Megan, at 2:00 in the morning, we are imagining the worst case scenario. As I remember going for a walk with Tammy, my wife, once, and saying, do you ever rehearse conversations with another person that you hope to never have? She's like, yeah, all the time. Right. So we're rehearsing the worst case scenario. It affects our physiology. It gets in our way. So we kind of do the opposite. I'll get through this. I'm a good supervisor. I've worked with this person before. They usually end up calming down. If I engage this way, I'll probably get there. That kind of thing. So I think there are definitely internal strategies. And even if the person that is we're dealing with is having a big reaction, again, sometimes we underestimate our ability to get them back. There are ways we can engage, even if it feels really difficult, that can calm it and can help redirect this in so much more productive direction.
So, Bill, one of the methods you've developed is called the CARS method. And it's very effective at understanding what's needed in a conversation or with a situation, a high conflict situation. It's really rather simple. It's just hard to do. It's hard to remember sometimes because it's opposite of what we're used to doing in difficult and challenging situations. So tell us a little bit about the CARS method and kind of what it helps a leader do, or helps someone in HR or an HR professional do.
Yeah, so it's designed to address 4 of the biggest areas that high conflict people have difficulty, or anyone has difficulty in a conflict. So, and I think it's easy to remember the word CARS because it's a familiar word, but it's CARS. And I think when people catch me by surprise, and a lot of these conflicts, especially high conflicts, have a lot of emotion and catch you by surprise. Someone walks in and says, I can't believe that you did this, or I can't believe that she did this, or whatever. And I go, okay, I've got to connect, analyze, respond, and set limits. All right, so connecting. Yeah, I need to show some empathy, some attention, some respect. So I'll say, wow, sounds like something big's going on. That sounds really hard or sounds frustrating. So that's empathy. I hear your frustration. And if we can put a word on what we think is happening, it often helps calm it, including ourselves. Like you were saying, Michael, that, check in with ourselves. I can go, I'm afraid, or I'm angry, or I'm worried, or I'm under time pressure. It's like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. It's almost like I've got a word for it now. It's a problem that I can solve. It's manageable. But so you give someone some empathy, you pay attention, you say, wow, what's going on? Tell me more. I want to understand. And when people are upset and you say something like that, they almost always calm down immediately because they don't have to get your attention. They have your attention. And it doesn't cost you like more than a minute to say, wow, tell me what's happening. People pretty quickly, well, this, and this, so-and-so didn't clean up in the lunchroom yet again. You've got to do something about this, Bill. So it is listening and understanding. Say, oh, wow, that's too bad. Okay, well, let's look at what we can do.
And Bill, I just want to say here, I like to refer to this as the replacements. Right? Our normal responses and reactions, particularly in high conflict, are not going to work very well. So we have to replace what we're used to doing with this other thing. And what you're talking about here are ear statements, right? Empathy, attention, and then the last one being
respect.
Respect.
And people, especially in the workplace, want respect. And if you can respect something about them, say, wow, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Now, of course, something that we like to tell managers is as soon as you become a manager and you talk with your employees, is tell them, whenever you bring me a problem, please bring me a proposed solution. And that's going to get into the A of the CARS method. So A stands for analyzing. It's thinking through the problem. So let's take this messy lunchroom again. So you've connected with the person telling you this. Say, I can respect your concern. That's too bad. That sounds like that keeps happening. Now, what can we do about this? What did you said this isn't the first time. What do you propose could be done with this problem? We want to get the person thinking. So often proposals are what can help, especially with employees who are on the front line with the situation. They know more about it than I do. And so tell me what you think the solution is. And we can talk that through. And it's like, oh, well, maybe you can propose this to John, who's the person who left it messy again and forgot. And maybe when you talk to John, you ask John, so what's going on for you? Apparently, this has happened before. Is this, kind of an oversight, or is this a dispute or a style difference or whatever it is, to help understand and maybe even guide the employee that came in and complained to have the discussion with John. So why don't you talk to John, ask what's happening, and suggest a solution. So anyway, analyzing options, because what happens a lot when people are real upset is there's only one way, and it's my way or the highway. But if you think, what are some of the options here? Let's brainstorm this a little bit. Then people loosen up and start thinking. And when they're thinking, they're not reacting as much. So I think it's a brain thing. The brain, if it's problem solving, it doesn't have a lot of room for just reacting. And if it's reacting, it doesn't have a lot of room for problem solving. So part of the goal here is to shift the attention from reacting to problem solving. The R is responding to misinformation or hostility. And that's like the BIFF method, verbally or in writing, like the one I said where there was noise yesterday and I was out of town. So, you may want to look into that with somebody else. And the S is setting limits. And this is so important with high conflict people, high conflict behavior, because they often are kind of going in a different direction, and they often don't really pay attention to limits. They almost ignore those because they're on their own path. But if there's consequences, then that's what's really going to get their attention. So let's say it's setting limits in the lunchroom. And so, you know, if this has happened before, and sounds like everyone agrees it happened before, and the person that keeps leaving it a mess says, I'm just not used to having to clean up until the end of the day. Where I grew up, we left things because we had brilliant ideas, and we were not going to stop our brilliant idea from developing by just washing the stupid dirty dish. We'll get to that at the end of the day. And you can say, well, let's have a different system and design what it's going to be, or who's in charge of following up. You've got like 6 coffee cups there that no one's washed. Maybe it's my day to wash the coffee cups. Maybe we rotate. A schedule might solve the problem. So anyway, there's many different ways, but setting limits and imposing consequences, if that's not done, then you're going to be the person that has to do the cleanup next week. Maybe that's the solution. But the idea is think in terms of connecting, and that turns into a problem to solve. Analyzing options or choices, here's your choices now. Don't try to give people insight in high conflict situations. It just triggers defensiveness. Talk about what to do. Get them outside of themselves. And if they have a high conflict personality, they're so used to being criticized, that's just going to trigger more upset. But the future and what to do is where the solutions are, and no one has to defend themselves. Like, oh, okay, let's all do this new system. Let's do the schedule. Great. Problem solved. No one has to be angry, upset, and now we can get on to the brilliant ideas.
So thank you, Bill. And Michael, I was going to ask you a question that we get a lot, which is, what if I have a narcissistic boss, right? We get that from whether it's an employee, it's HR, it's a leader. We get this question a lot. But instead of asking that question, I think it might behoove us to think about it in terms of the CARS method, right? Do we use the CARS method all the time? Do we use it when we have it, or is like having this boss that's very difficult to work with, is that just a whole separate issue? Or can that be handled, let's say by an employee, with the CARS method?
Yeah, I think it's not going to be very helpful if we say, now you're going to have to do something completely different and use, a different part of your brain when it's a different role or character, right? So I absolutely do think the CARS method is, there's some universal ways we can apply it, but the context differs. And then sometimes what we might emphasize, how we might go about it. But if let's say I have a boss, and I've been there where somebody comes up to me that, and I know if I come straight at them, it's not going to be good for me, and I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not going to be successful, and they're going to end up blaming me. So if they say, Michael, I want you to do this, I'm like, that is such a bad idea, right? I want to kind of go enact, hey, respect you. You've thought a lot about this, or I can see how, where you're sitting that would really work out well. And then move to problem solving, information, education, choices. We could do that. And also, here's another option I see, lay that out, and even lay out the consequences of the different choices, information, straight information, trying to manage my tone, trying to manage my own kind of like, that's such a bad idea. We need to do this one, because then we almost end up in an argument, or somehow the person might feel criticized about what they came forward with. And you and I are good. I want the best for this solution too. That we could do that. Here's another option, information, potentially consequences, that kind of thing. And so that way I'm setting limits by talking about the consequences, but I'm leaving this person, you're the boss, you're the one making the decision. This is to help you. And then they may go, okay, I like that idea. Let's do that. They may not. And then I have to think about, over the long term, is this a relationship I can maintain? But those CARS method strategies, same with BIFF. We can absolutely use BIFF. If I'm feeling blamed or my team is getting blamed, how do I respond? So I think the same tools can work really, really well. And then what I would just say is, if I'm higher up in that chain, whether HR or I'm a senior leader and I get feedback about that kind of leader and there's a consistent pattern, then I need to think about how I weigh in on that, how I engage on it. That's really important.
Sounds strangely empowering, Michael. It gives us a real tool, right? I mean, we actually see results.
Yep.
It's amazing. So speaking of results, let's talk about coaching and some of the methods that, solutions that can be used in the workplace. Because with CARS method, we're talking about, and BIFF, we're talking about how we approach a high conflict situation or a high conflict conversation. So how do we then, what are some of the methods we can use and applications we can use to move leaders and teams from, reacting to conflict toward building better habits and better outcomes? Is there a way to handle this? Let's say we've used an ear statement and it's worked in this conversation. Right. And that person is probably, if they do have a high conflict personality, is probably going to come back to us with another issue later, especially because you're the one that makes them feel calm and heard. Right. But what is it when you have this bigger picture and we need to help leaders with more outcomes, better outcomes?
Right. And I think this is where in the last episode, we talked about HR and some of the challenges for HR and how they're trained to look at incidents versus patterns, and how, again, they're really sometimes following a process around, do we need to do an investigation, instead of maybe looking forward and saying, how are we going to improve this behavior over time? And so I think for HR, it is also seeing themselves as a coach of that leader. And the more that they are aligned, the leader and the HR rep are aligned in terms of using these skills and these approaches when they see these patterns, then the leader feels supported. Sometimes you have leaders that feel caught in the middle. I know what I'm dealing with, but when I go back to get advice, it could be from my own boss or from human resources. Their advice is either not practical or somehow it's so impartial and so neutral that I'm not feeling supported. I feel very, very alone. And then I'm going to avoid, or what am I going to do to just keep the heat off me, becomes my number one thing. But I think with an individual that we see a pattern of behavior and we're saying, well, what can we do to address that? I remember I've had managers say to me, I'm telling the person what they're supposed to be doing. Human resources has given me the script. This is what you're supposed to be doing at work. And I'm looking at the person and I think, if they knew how to do that, they'd do it, but they don't know how to do it. That's the problem.
They lack the skill.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's easy for me to say, well, just be more respectful with your coworkers, your colleagues. You can't, you must send emails like this. And yet I've got this tool, BIFF. Am I supposed to teach them BIFF? Is that what I'm supposed to do? And then that person could actually benefit from BIFF. Even if they see hostility everywhere, great. Use BIFF, right? Mm-hmm. When you're responding to your hostile coworkers, that will make them seem more reasonable. They'll show up more reasonable. That actually might change the way their coworkers respond to them. And then things start to improve. So let's say we can't go for insight, change the person or the personality, but they can learn skills and we can go for some behavioral improvement. So New Ways for Work, a highly structured skills-based coaching method, is really good for that. The thing is, it takes time because we're talking about behavioral change. So that isn't just a few sessions. And I've worked with other coaches that are going for insight sometimes with these folks. And they say, I can do it, Michael. I'm like, oh, great, go for it. And then at the end of the 6 sessions, well, what do you expect me to do in 6 sessions? I don't know. You were kind of optimistic you could do it, right? So we need more time for sure. But it's focused on future behavior. It's focused on teaching those skills, like even teaching ear to this person, teaching BIFF, teaching them how to make proposals, how to calm themselves, how to behave moderately in the workplace. And there's practice, there's accountability within the coaching process, and it actually helps build hope and a way forward for this person. Now they know what to do. And you said, Bill, focus them on tasks, focus them on what to do, not on insight. This focuses them on what to do. They start to feel more confident. They're getting better reactions from other people. This is about how to help them succeed versus shaming them. And now it gives leaders in HR, what are we going to do instead of giving this person a 2-day suspension and hoping they get it? Well, they're probably not going to get it. They're going to go home, get in their echo chamber on social media or talk to their friends and family and say, the organization is so mean. Can you believe they did this to me? Wow, that's awful. That's terrible.
Or call
they're
a lawyer.
not going to learn what we hope, right?
Right.
And so I think this kind of structured approach to coaching that is skills-based, we're not going for insight, is a real alternative, sometimes to a suspension. It gives them a chance to improve. Now we have a way to measure, and we can even ask them, what are you getting out of it? Well, this is for babies. I know how to do all this stuff already. Okay, you're not getting a lot out of it versus I'm working on my flexible thinking. I'm working on how to make proposals. Great. And it aligns with a trauma-informed, no blame, no shame approach, right? So even if we say, I don't know where this is coming from, I might have a lot of empathy for this person's pain if I knew all of their story, all of their experiences. Well, this actually is still a good method, a good approach. And so, what I would say is instead of a 2-day suspension and giving them a list of courses to take and hoping they get something out of it, and they're sitting in the back of the course going, they're not talking about me, talking about somebody else, right? Or they're getting mad. I got sent for this. New Ways for Work gives them a structured path to behavioral improvement, and it gives leaders a hope for what change is possible. And I would say, like, if the leader's using the CARS method and then the employee's learning New Ways for Work, it's almost like two pieces of Lego. They plug in together. Now it's not all on the leader, but the way they respond reinforces the skills the person's learning.
Yeah, I really think that the coaching gives the focus on the future, on the skill. And a big part of the coaching to me is the role play practice. So let's say you've got 6 sessions, and already in the first session, it's like, tell me what was a problem in the workplace? What happened? Well, this person said this to me, and I just can't have people say things like that to me. And so I reacted and said this to them, and now here I am. I'm supposed to get this coaching. Say, okay, well, let's take a scenario like that and look at what you could say. And so let's do this. What I like to do in the role plays is say, I'll be you, and you be the person who's difficult in your situation. And you say the things to me that difficult person would say. And I'll make notes of them. Now let's switch roles. I'll say what that person's saying, and let's talk about what you can say. And of course, I often start with giving yourself an encouraging statement. So before you say anything, you're just sitting there going, I am a good employee. I know my work. I'm well trained. I've had a lot of experience. And you tell yourself that as you're being criticized, it helps you stay calm. And then, you know what, so-and-so, I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. We see it differently, and I've got to go work on another project right now. So thanks for letting me know your concerns. See you later. And it's so simple. That's the thing. To me, what really works the best is really simple, but I didn't say it's easy.
Right.
It takes practice.
And I think as well for whether it's leaders or someone in human resources, you now actually have a way of measuring and evaluating whether the person is capable of not just performance, can they do the work, but also can they do the behavior at work? Mm-hmm. And you always want to be able to teach people the things you need them to do and then see if they can do it, right? Before you say it's not going to work, we're going to have to terminate them. And so in this way, we are teaching the skills. And now if the person returns and they are, they're able to engage, okay, great. But if not, we're seeing the same problems or even it's getting worse. They're just don't, they, even if they said, I'm loving the coaching, this is great, but we're just not seeing the changes at work we need to see. Well, now you've taught them, you've given them that opportunity. And now you're more confident saying we need to go to the next step.
And that's a real benefit. Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
going to say that's a real benefit of the coaching. And there's a lot of times we've had where people either refuse to do coaching and say, well, then look, I'm close to retirement. I'm just going to retire. Or I've just found this other job. I'm out of here. Because some high conflict people don't want the humiliation of needing coaching, when in fact it can really be helpful for success. But they interpret it as, I'm being treated unfairly. And so some people just leave then. Some people go through some coaching and don't learn from it and need to be moved out of that division or maybe the whole organization. So coaching isn't just improving behavior with high conflict people. If they're not going to improve behavior, it helps you find that out rather than just, firing people before you know what their potential is. Sorry, I interrupted.
No worries. So thank you, Bill and Michael. Really fascinating conversation. So listeners, thank you for joining us here in episode 3 of this 4-part series here on It's All Your Fault. We've talked about why workplace conflict is increasing, how to assess it more accurately, and what leaders can do in the moment. So in the next episode, we're going to kind of zoom out from individual leaders and individual cases to the organization as a whole. What does a conflict-ready organization do differently? How can HR move from reactive conflict management to a more strategic, measurable, organization-wide approach? So don't miss it. If you're looking for training or consultation about a high conflict situation for your organization, visit us at highconflictinstitute.com, including if you're interested in our new assessment for organizations to determine if you are conflict ready. And if you have a high conflict situation in your personal life, visit conflictinfluencer.com. Keep learning and practicing the skills. Be kind to yourself and others while we all try to keep the conflict small and find the missing piece.